Caius Varel adjusted the strap of his worn pack as he climbed the jagged rocks of Tiranen's Reach. The twin suns hung low, burning orange over the cliffs and valleys below. Smoke curled from distant settlements where miners dug deep into the stone for virion, the rare mineral that powered the colony's technology. The wind carried the faint metallic tang of the mines, and the distant, uneasy whispers of danger. He had grown up here in this rough, unforgiving world. Every scar on his arms, every cut on his hands, told a story of survival. But nothing he had faced could prepare him for what was rumored to be prowling the southern ridges. The predator dragons were real. Stories had called them monsters, but Caius knew better. They were something beyond human imagination. Massive, intelligent, and lethal. Their scales reflected sunlight like black mirrors. Their claws could tear through the strongest alloy, and their eyes could see fear. The radio crackled behind him. A scout's voice trembled. Caius, dragon sighting, southern ridge, moving fast, miners trapped. Caius's stomach tightened. Fear didn't grip him. He had no time for fear, but he felt the weight of responsibility. Every second counted. The miners were counting on him. The colony depended on him. He slung his vibrolance over his shoulder and sprinted down the slope, stones skidding under his boots. He didn't have the luxury to think, only to act. His mind raced through calculations. The distance to the miners, the dragon's likely path, his energy supply. Humans were smaller, weaker, and slower than the dragon, but humans had brains, courage, and creativity. That was their edge. That was why he could face what others fled from. When he crested the ridge, the scene froze him for a heartbeat. A predator dragon crouched among the rocks, its obsidian scales gleaming in the fading light. Its nostrils flared, and a thin trail of smoke rose from its mouth. Below it, a miner was trapped, bleeding from a deep slash across his arm. The dragon's gaze was locked on the man, unblinking, calculating. Caius's heart raced. He swallowed hard, feeling a cold dread creep into his chest. The dragon's sheer size made him doubt for a second. Any human could die in a single strike, but he forced himself to focus. Hesitation was death. The miner's eyes met his, wide with panic and hope. Caius nodded once, sharply. He was not leaving anyone behind. He crouched low, edging forward, keeping the dragon in sight. The creature's tail lashed the ground, sending rocks flying, its wings tensing for a strike. Caius activated his virion flare, a small handheld pulse device that sent out a burst of disorienting energy. The dragon's head snapped toward him, nostrils flaring as the light and sound hit it. The miner seized the moment and scrambled to safety. But the dragon was far from defeated. It roared, a deep, bone-shaking sound that echoed across the cliffs, rattling loose stones and making the air vibrate. Caius felt it in his chest. He ducked behind a boulder, panting, and watched the predator circle, eyes narrowing. It was intelligent, he could feel that. It was not mindless. It was studying him, learning, waiting for a mistake. Caius scanned the ridge. Every rock, every crevice, every shadow could be either a trap or a shield. His eyes landed on the jagged cliffs overhead, the thin spires of stone hardened by centuries of wind and sun. An idea sparked. He could not fight the dragon head-on, not now. But he could outthink it. Every human had to survive by brains if brawn would fail. The dragon shifted, sensing movement. Its wings spread and dust swirled around it like a storm. Caius clenched his jaw. He had to act, and soon. One wrong move and the creature could shred the ridge, crush the miners, or end him in a single strike. His pulse hammered, but fear stayed at bay, replaced by the human stubbornness that had kept him alive so long. He glanced down at the miner, who now hid behind a rocky outcrop. The young man's eyes were wide, pale in the sun's glow, yet shining with trust. Caius felt a surge of determination. He had a choice: run and save himself, or face impossible odds and protect others. He took a slow, careful step forward, keeping the dragon in his sight. The creature's gaze followed, a predator recognizing a threat or challenge. Dust rose with each of its movements. Caius steadied his vibrolance, checked his flare charge, and whispered under his breath, "I've got this. We survive." The wind shifted. A loose stone tumbled from above. The dragon's tail whipped around, knocking it aside. Its eyes, dark and glinting, fixed on Caius again. Time seemed to stretch. 1 heartbeat, 2, 3. Caius's mind calculated paths, distances, angles. There was a chance, a narrow, fragile chance, but it was all he had. Then the dragon lunged. The ground shook. Rocks skittered and cracked. The roar tore through the air like fire. Caius dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the crushing claws. His chest burned, adrenaline screaming, but he rose immediately, gripping his vibrolance tighter. He had only begun. Survival meant outthinking, outmaneuvering, and never giving up. And as the dragon circled, snarling, Caius realized something chilling. This wasn't just a hunt. The predator was testing him. It knew humans could be clever. It was waiting to see if one of them could match it. Caius squared his shoulders. His mind raced. His next move would decide the fate of the miner and perhaps the colony itself. The dragon's roar echoed once more, louder and closer than before. And Caius took a step forward, ready to face what no human had survived before. Caius pressed his back against a jagged rock, watching the predator dragon move with terrifying grace. Its claws tore shallow trenches into the cliff, sending pebbles skittering into the valley below. Every muscle in its body was coiled, ready to strike. The air smelled of ozone and scorched stone from its nostrils. He could hear the miner breathing hard behind him, eyes wide, hands trembling. "Stay down," Caius hissed, though his own heart pounded in his chest. Fear was natural, but it had to be controlled. Panic got humans killed faster than dragon claws. Caius scanned the ridge. The terrain was jagged and unforgiving, but it offered opportunities if he thought fast. The dragon's bulk was its strength, and its weakness. It could move with speed and power, but the narrow ledges limited its movements. One misstep, one clever use of the environment could tip the balance. He activated the Virion flare, sending a bright pulse of light toward the creature. The dragon recoiled, growling, smoke curling from its nostrils. It stepped back, wings flaring, giving the miner a moment to slide to a safer ledge. Caius felt a surge of hope, but he knew it wouldn't last. This was only the beginning. The dragon's eyes, dark and intelligent, locked onto him again. It sniffed the air, nostrils twitching, and tilted its head. It was studying him, learning, calculating. Caius realized something chilling. It wasn't attacking blindly. It was testing him. Every move he made now would matter, and a single mistake could mean death. He noticed a thin spire of rock above, jagged and brittle looking. If it could be dislodged, it might slow the dragon, or at least distract it. Caius clenched his jaw and whispered to himself, "One step at a time. Think. Move." The dragon lunged suddenly. Its wings beat the air, stirring dust and loose stones. Caius barely rolled out of the way as claws slammed into the ground where he had been standing seconds ago. The rock beneath him cracked, sending a shower of pebbles down the cliffside. The miner cried out from behind a boulder. Caius felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He couldn't let this end in death. Not for the miner, not for the colony. He darted forward, using the terrain as cover. His mind worked in overdrive, calculating angles, timing, and distances. Humans weren't stronger, but they were clever. He could use the environment to force the dragon into a mistake. Every movement had a purpose. Every second counted. The dragon hissed and charged again, faster this time, claws tearing at the cliff. Caius dodged to the side and grabbed a jagged stone from the ridge. He hurled it with all his strength. The rock struck the dragon's foreleg with a sharp clang. The creature snarled, but it staggered only slightly. That was all Caius needed. He ran along a narrow ledge, closer to the brittle spire overhead. The dragon turned its head, sensing him, but he was careful. Every step measured, every breath controlled. He reached the base of the spire and swung his vibrolance, striking it sharply. The stone groaned, then cracked. Dust and small shards rained down. The dragon roared in frustration and leaped toward him, claws outstretched. Caius ducked instinctively, sliding under the sweep of its massive claws. The spire above cracked further, a thunderous rumble echoing down the ridge. Rocks loosened and tumbled. The dragon tried to leap back, but one wing caught on the jagged edge, scraping painfully. It roared, twisting to free itself. Caius's heart raced. He felt fear, yes, but it was mixed with something stronger: determination, courage, and the stubborn human will to survive. He knew this was his only chance. The dragon could recover fast. He had seconds, maybe less. He edged closer to the creature, eyes fixed, calculating his next move. The miner peered from behind a boulder, voice trembling. "Caius, what now?" "Keep low. Watch and learn," Caius muttered, though his throat was dry. The dragon's attention was on him, not the miner, exactly as planned. He needed one clean, decisive action to gain control, even if temporary. He noticed a narrow chasm nearby, too tight for the dragon to fit without risking its balance. That could be his trap. He would bait it toward the chasm, force it into a confined space, and limit its power. The dragon moved with careful steps, sniffing, circling, testing his nerve. Its intelligence unnerved him. This wasn't just a hunt, it was a challenge. Caius clenched his fists. His mind raced, each second alive with possibility and risk. One wrong move and everything would be over. But he had no choice. Humans survived by facing the impossible, by thinking faster than the danger in front of them. He took a deep breath, eyes on the dragon, legs ready to sprint, heart hammering. The creature's gaze followed him, massive wings twitching, tail lashing. Every instinct screamed danger, but Caius gritted his teeth and took the first step toward the trap he had calculated. The cliff seemed to hold its breath. The dragon moved with him, silent now except for the rumble of its claws on rock. Caius's pulse surged. Every second mattered. Every movement counted. And then, just as he reached the edge of the planned chasm, the dragon shifted suddenly, faster than he expected, wings unfolding, eyes locking onto him with something more than hunger, curiosity, challenge, and deadly intelligence. Caius froze for a heartbeat. He realized this encounter was no longer just about survival. It was a test. The predator dragon lunged toward him, claws scraping the cliffside. Caius braced, gripping his vibrolance, knowing the next seconds would decide not just his life, but the fate of the trapped miner and the colony beyond. Caius's chest heaved as the dragon lunged, its claws scraping the cliffside with a deafening roar. Dust and stones flew in every direction, hitting him in the face, stinging his eyes, but he didn't flinch. Every second counted, and hesitation meant death. He had to think faster than the dragon could strike. He remembered the jagged spires overhead, brittle with age yet sharp as knives. If he could dislodge one at the right moment, it might slow the beast or even injure it. The problem was timing. He had to strike while the dragon was committed to its leap. A millisecond too early or too late and it would crush him instead. He crouched low, vibrolance in hand, calculating the angle and the force needed. His mind raced like a machine, tracking the dragon's center of mass, its momentum and the uneven terrain beneath it. Humans lacked raw strength, but humans had brains. He had to outsmart it, not outfight it. The dragon landed with a ground-shaking thud, wings folding in, tail whipping. Its eyes glinted, black as obsidian, filled with raw intelligence. It understood threat, challenge, and hesitation. Caius felt a shiver down his spine. Most humans would have panicked, screamed, or run. He had to act. He hurled his first strike, aiming a jagged rock with his vibrolance at the base of a spire. The stone struck true and a crack ran up the brittle rock. The dragon reacted instantly, lashing its tail toward him, knocking loose debris. Caius ducked under the swing, rolling to avoid being crushed. He felt the heat of its wings brushing past him, the smell of ozone thick in the air. Another spire caught his attention. If it fell, it could partially trap one of the dragon's massive wings against the cliff. He sprinted along a narrow ledge, heart pounding, every step calculated. The dragon followed, eyes tracking him, nostrils flaring as though mocking him, measuring his courage. Caius reached the base of the second spire. He braced the vibrolance, striking sharply at the stone. The rock quivered, then groaned, releasing a small avalanche of debris. A massive chunk struck the dragon's wing. It roared, thrashing violently, caught between instinct and the confines of the cliff. Rocks rained down around them. Caius felt the vibrations in the ground under his feet. The miner he was protecting peeked out from a lower ledge, eyes wide with awe and fear. "Caius, it's huge," he shouted, voice trembling. "Stay down. Keep out of sight." Caius yelled back, not taking his eyes off the dragon. Every second now was life or death. He had to manipulate the creature, using the terrain and his ingenuity. Humans were fragile, but humans could think in ways creatures like this couldn't anticipate. He spotted a narrow chasm ahead. Its walls were too close for the dragon to maneuver freely. If he could bait it toward that trap, its strength would become its weakness. Caius took a deep breath, steadying his shaking hands. His entire strategy depended on drawing the dragon into it. One misstep, one hesitation, and the plan would fail. Caius shouted, waving his vibrolance to distract the dragon. The beast hesitated, then charged. Dust and stones erupted from the impact. He ran, carefully balancing on the narrow ledge, guiding the dragon toward the chasm without making a fatal mistake. Every movement was deliberate, precise. One false step and he could plummet to his death. The dragon sensed the trap but was already committed. Its wings scraped the cliffs, tearing chunks from the walls. Caius gritted his teeth and pressed on, knowing that he had only seconds before it could recover and strike again. He reached the edge of the chasm, glanced back, and saw the dragon hesitating, too large to move freely without risking collapse. He smiled briefly, adrenaline surging. The human brain had outmaneuvered raw power, for now. But he knew it wasn't over. The dragon thrashed violently, its wings brushing against the cliff face, stones tumbling into the abyss. It roared, a sound that shook the air, full of intelligence, frustration, and fury. Caius's mind worked faster than ever. He had the creature in the trap, but he still needed a decisive strike to gain control or force it to retreat. His pulse pounded, but he kept calm, eyes scanning the terrain for the next advantage. He needed one clean move, just one, to tip the odds in his favor. He noticed a cluster of loose stones above, perched precariously on a ledge. If dislodged, they could hit the dragon's head or shoulder, forcing it further into the chasm and limiting its movement. Timing was critical. Caius climbed carefully, every movement measured, aware that a single misstep could send him plunging into the canyon below. The dragon's gaze followed him, black eyes gleaming with awareness. It hissed, flaring its wings, tail whipping, sensing his plan. Caius froze for a heartbeat. The creature was clever, maybe too clever. Any sudden move could trigger a counterattack. He clenched his jaw, took a steadying breath and whispered to himself, "Humans survive by thinking. Not by running. Not by hiding." Then he lunged upward, striking the ledge. Stones tumbled, striking the dragon's massive head. It roared again, thrashing violently but trapped in the narrow chasm, its wings pinned awkwardly. Caius landed, chest heaving, adrenaline firing every nerve. The miner peeked out again, awe and fear written across his face. "Caius, you did it?" Caius didn't answer. The dragon wasn't defeated, just contained. Its intelligence, its fury, and its sheer power were still present. He knew this was only the first step. He had forced it into a trap, but the final challenge, the one that would decide life or death, was yet to come. He wiped sweat from his brow and stared at the creature. One wrong move now and everything could collapse. But he also knew something else. Humans survived impossible odds not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to give up. Caius gritted his teeth, gripping the vibrolance. He was ready. The moment for the decisive move, the one that would test every ounce of courage, intelligence, and determination he possessed, was almost here. The dragon's roar echoed through the cliffs, louder and closer than ever. Its massive body thrashed, desperate to escape. Caius's pulse surged. 1 second, one move, and everything would change. Caius pressed his back against the cliff wall, breathing hard. The dragon thrashed in the narrow chasm, wings pinned awkwardly, tail smashing loose rocks into the abyss. Its eyes, black and brilliant with fury, followed every movement. The creature was intelligent, calculating, and aware of every possibility, but Caius had one advantage: human ingenuity. He scanned the chasm carefully. The walls were jagged, uneven, with loose shards of virion embedded in the rock. One precise strike could trigger a controlled collapse. Not enough to kill the dragon, he refused that, but enough to keep it contained long enough to save the miners and escape. The miner crouched behind a boulder, pale and trembling. "Caius, what now?" he whispered, voice barely audible over the dragon's roar. "Stay down. Watch and learn," Caius muttered. His voice was calm, but inside, adrenaline surged like fire. Fear was a luxury he could not afford. Every second mattered. The dragon was testing him, every movement a question. One wrong answer would cost them both their lives. He moved carefully along the ledge, checking the stability of the rock under his boots. His vibrolance hummed faintly in his hand, a tool for precision, not brute force. Humans didn't have claws or fangs strong enough to fight this predator head-on, but humans had brains, reflexes, and courage. That was their edge. Caius reached the base of a jagged overhang. If he could dislodge it at just the right moment, it might pin the dragon's wing more securely and trap it against the cliffside. Timing would be everything. He crouched, pressing the lance against the brittle rock, calculating angles and weight distribution. The dragon sensed the motion and lunged toward him. Its wings flared, scraping the cliff, tail lashing, claws tearing shallow trenches into the stone. Caius rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding a crushing blow. Loose shards fell around him, dust stinging his eyes. He ignored it, gripping the lance tighter. He glanced at the miner. The boy's eyes were wide with fear and awe, but he didn't panic. That small spark of hope, that trust in human courage, gave Caius strength. He couldn't fail, not now, not ever. He leapt upward, striking the brittle rock with all his strength. A low rumble echoed through the chasm as a cluster of stones cracked free. The dragon roared, thrashing violently, but its wing caught, pinned awkwardly against the cliff wall. Rocks slid down, tumbling past Caius, narrowly missing him. The chasm had become a cage, limiting the dragon's movements. Caius didn't stop. He saw a cluster of loose stones overhead, balanced precariously. Another strike, carefully timed, could make them fall across the dragon's head, forcing it deeper into the trap. He climbed, muscles burning, heart racing, adrenaline screaming through his veins. One misstep, one miscalculation, and the fall could be fatal. He struck. Stones dislodged, tumbling in a controlled avalanche. They bounced off the dragon's scaled head with a thunderous clang. The beast roared, wings flaring, tail lashing, but it was contained. Caius landed on a small ledge, chest heaving. Sweat stung his eyes, but he didn't pause. There was no time for relief. The miner peeked again, voice trembling. Caius, it's trapped. Yes, for now, Caius said, eyes fixed on the dragon. He knew it wasn't over. The creature's intelligence made it dangerous even when confined. He had to act fast or it could escape, killing everyone. He scanned the ridge above. Another narrow ledge, if breached, could funnel the dragon even further, forcing it to retreat into the tightest part of the chasm. It would be enough to buy time for evacuation. But the jump was dangerous, a heroic leap with no room for error. Caius took a deep breath, muscles coiled like springs. Fear whispered in his mind, but courage drowned it out. Humans survived impossible odds not because they were strong, but because they refused to yield. He crouched, then launched himself across the narrow gap, landing on the jagged ledge with a precise roll. The dragon lunged again, but now its movements were constrained. Caius gritted his teeth, swinging the vibrolance to strike loose a final cluster of stones. They tumbled perfectly, forcing the dragon into the tightest corner of the chasm. Its wings scraped the rock, tail whipping, teeth bared, eyes blazing, but it could go no further. Caius landed back on stable ground, chest heaving. He had done it. The dragon was trapped, not defeated but contained. Its roar echoed through the cliffs, a mixture of frustration, awareness, and raw power. Caius wiped sweat from his brow. The miner scrambled toward him, eyes wide with awe. You did it?" the boy breathed, voice trembling. Caius shook his head, still watching the dragon. "Not yet. We're alive, but this isn't over. We've bought time, nothing more." He exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what he had accomplished. Humans had faced the impossible and survived, not through brute strength but through courage, intelligence, and determination. The dragon glared at him, eyes reflecting something almost human: respect, challenge, awareness. Caius understood then that this creature was not a mindless predator. It was a rival intelligence, testing him, measuring him. And for the first time he realized something profound. Humans didn't just survive by fighting. They survived by thinking, daring, and refusing to yield. He glanced toward the distant mines, the smoke rising from the colony. The trapped miners would need rescue. The dragon could break free if left too long. But for now he had created a chance, a fragile, narrow chance for survival. Caius sheathed his vibrolance, muscles trembling with fatigue, but mind still sharp. He felt pride, relief, and awe all at once. Humans had survived again, not by power alone but by ingenuity and courage. The dragon's roar echoed one last time, fading slightly as it realized its movements were restricted. Caius looked down at the miner, who nodded, trembling but alive. They had faced death together and survived. And Caius knew, the final moment was coming. One last move, one decisive action would seal the outcome. But the choice and the risk would be entirely his. Caius crouched at the edge of the chasm, sweat dripping from his brow, muscles trembling with fatigue, but his mind was razor-sharp. The predator dragon thrashed below, trapped against the cliffs by the clever traps he had set. Its wings scraped the rock, claws digging for purchase, eyes blazing with fury and intelligence. It was alive, aware, and more dangerous than ever, but Caius had one advantage humans always possessed: ingenuity and courage. He checked the vibrolance one last time. The disruptor pod he had fashioned from a spare virion cell could send a precise pulse of energy strong enough to immobilize a large creature temporarily. One shot, perfectly timed, and the dragon could be contained without bloodshed. One miscalculation and both he and the miner could fall to the jagged rocks below. The miner crouched behind a boulder, pale but watching, trust shining in his wide eyes. "Caius, can you really do it?" Caius shook his head slowly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I don't know, but humans survive by trying. We survive by daring when all odds are against us. Watch carefully." He adjusted the angle, checked the wind, calculated the timing. The dragon sensed him moving and lunged again, wings flaring, tail smashing rocks into the canyon. Caius leapt onto a small ledge, heart hammering. His pulse screamed danger, but his mind stayed calm. The creature could kill him instantly, but he would not let fear dictate his actions. With a deep breath, he hurled the disruptor pod. It struck the dragon's chest, embedding in the thick scales. The device hummed, pulsing energy in sync with the dragon's bioelectric field. The beast reared, claws lashing, tail smashing the ground, but then it froze, muscles twitching violently. Its roar echoed, deep and furious, but it could not move freely. The predator's own power had been turned against it, not with strength but with cleverness. Caius's legs shook as he landed safely on a ledge, heart pounding. He glanced at the miner, who now ran toward him with relief written across his face. You did it," the boy gasped. Caius nodded, though he didn't relax. The dragon was contained, yes, but not defeated. It was intelligent, aware, and now cautious. It had tested him, and he had survived, not because he was the strongest but because he had dared, thought, and refused to yield. Humans survived impossible odds in ways predators could not predict. The miner's fear faded into awe. "Caius, you're incredible." Caius exhaled slowly, letting some of the tension drain from his body. "We did it," he corrected gently. "Humans survived together. That was the true strength, courage, brains, and solidarity against impossible odds." The dragon exhaled, a plume of smoke curling toward the twin suns. Its eyes locked on Caius one last time, almost as if acknowledging his skill and bravery. Caius understood something profound. This creature was not a mindless predator. It was a rival intelligence capable of understanding, challenge, and maybe even respect. He turned to the miner, who was trembling but alive. "Let's get you back to the colony," he said. "The others need to know we survived, and how." As they descended the ridge, word of the encounter spread quickly. Miners and engineers whispered in awe about the human who had stared down the predator dragon and survived. Children began calling it, the dragon that respected humans, a story that would grow into legend. Caius felt a quiet pride, not for himself but for the human spirit. Courage, ingenuity, and determination had prevailed. Back at the colony, the trapped miners were safe, thanks to the path Caius had cleared. Engineers studied his strategies, learning how humans could face threats that were physically far superior. The colony, once terrified of the predator dragons, now understood something essential. Humans were not to be underestimated. They could survive, adapt, and even thrive where others would perish. Caius stood on a cliff above the colony as the suns dipped below the horizon. The dragon remained in the peaks, a massive silhouette against the fading light. But it no longer represented fear alone. It was a reminder of human courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to bow to impossible odds. He felt exhaustion wash over him, but beneath it was satisfaction, the kind that only comes from facing something impossible and surviving. Humans had no natural armor, no colossal strength, no lethal claws, but they had something better: brains, courage, and the determination to fight for others. Caius gazed at the distant dragon, then back at the glowing lights of the colony. He knew that this encounter would inspire others, that humans would rise to challenges they could not yet imagine. And he knew deep down that wherever danger waited, wherever odds seemed insurmountable, humans would face it head-on, and survive. The dragon roared one final time, distant now, fading into the wind. Caius smiled faintly. Humans had stared down impossible odds. Humans had won. And somewhere deep in the heart of Terranen's reach, a story of courage, ingenuity, and human spirit had begun, one that would be told for generations. He turned back to the miner, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Remember this," he said quietly. "Humans survive by thinking, daring, and never giving up. That's what makes us human." And as they descended toward the lights of the colony, the twin suns setting behind them, Caius felt something he rarely did: hope. A fragile, blazing hope that humans could face the impossible and emerge stronger, wiser, and united. The predator dragon remained in the peaks, but the humans of Terranen's reach had already claimed a victory far greater than survival. They had claimed the future, forged with courage, intelligence, and the indomitable human spirit.